Hello and welcome back to the CyberSoc Podcast with me, Adam.
And me, Ryan. Adam, I want to know, how was your first week on the project?
Well, it's been interesting. We've worked on it from like a softer point. So we've been looking at getting wireframes up and running because the project we've been given is more research based. It's like a tech demo, kind of understanding problem and giving different solutions to it. Mm-hmm. So what I think we as a team thought would be a good idea is to try and flesh out those ideas and show them to a client before we start actually getting down and creating these stuff. So I've quite enjoyed it. We're creating the wireframes. There's a lot of like just thinking and creating fun ideas.
I feel quite excited with the stage we're at right now. It's been a nice like researchy phase, making up some wireframes and stuff. We had a really nice brainstorming session this week, which is not something that we've had on projects I've worked on before. Have you had like brainstorming sessions like that, Adam?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we're quite a really strong group, and I think we work well together. So I think that helps the ability to do that. But I really enjoyed.
I think that was hugely useful.
Yeah.
Because we thought up like a load of new ideas in the brainstorming session that we probably wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And it was nice to get all these ideas like onto a piece of paper. Well, it was a whiteboard, virtual one, but it was nice to have them all there in one place where we could see them all, and think up some new ideas. So I was really excited by that brainstorming session. That was really useful.
Yeah, I think it's easy to look at it and think, oh, this kind of like blue sky thinking, sat in a meeting, not achieving anything, isn't very productive. But I think actually there's a lot you can learn and improve from this. It's a lot of being a good software engineer isn't just coding, right? I think it's actually being able to see like the whole picture and being able to like think of different solutions and just envisage how different things could be done. I think it's also quite enjoyable to let yourself be a bit creative in that kind of environment. Yeah,
and it's all work, right? I mean, it isn't like any of this isn't work, and yeah, it is. What I think is like the big benefit of kind of like softer weeks like this, for example, is that you can really like start to understand the problem as a team, share that knowledge throughout the team, and you all start to understand the problems a bit better. You understand the solutions a bit better. Like, for example, we had, I'm going to do like a bit of a review with you here, not with the team. We'll do that separately, of some of like the agile practices and stuff we had in place for this week. So, for example, we had a planning poker session.
Yeah.
Where we sized up some of our issues for this week. But a lot of our issues were just making wireframes for this week, right? So the benefit of planning poker is usually to weigh your issues. You get a better idea of the size of issues and whether they need to split down, etc., right? And the sizing of that was not useful because we were just making wireframes. So the sizing of it wasn't useful. But I loved it, Adam, because that's not the real benefit of planning poker, is it?
So I don't actually think. I think only for like really miserly managers care about the size of issues,
yes,
and how long it will take. It's actually about the discussion. Is that what you're going to say?
That is the real value of planning poker. It's the hidden value that is not immediately obvious. You might just think of, this is a stupid process and it's wasting time. It could be easy to think that because you're just assigning arbitrary sizes to issues. It doesn't really mean that much, the actual sizing, right? But it's speaking about those issues that is the useful thing, speaking as a team about the issues, understanding them more. And especially at the start of a project, you really need to make sure you all are on the same page. You understand the issues. You've got similar kind of ideas of how they could be possibly implemented in the future, what they mean, Really important to understand that as a team at the start.
Yeah.
And that's the real value of planning poker.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff in the Agile like processes, the goal really is just to like create understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's to facilitate communication. I think as developers, sometimes we're not the best at just like having a chat about things and bringing up issues when we see them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a framework to facilitate that. So and I think it's really key to understand people's collective ideas of what the issues are. So if you're working in it in such a way that everyone already knows really what the issues are all about, planning poker is not really necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're occasionally finding yourself thinking, oh, I thought this issue was about this, but they thought it was about that, it's just a framework to try and solve that problem. I think the planning poker we did was quite good. I think there was somewhere to go from there. I think there was some times that I felt we didn't quite maybe get an issue to grasp, but I think it's the first week, so
I could see how you could like look at that planning poker session we had, because we were just sizing wireframes, basically how hard or difficult they'd be. I can see how you might look at that and think it's not useful, but that, as we've said, that isn't the benefit of it, is it? And it's easy for you to look at an issue and think in your head what this could be like. The hard part is making other people understand that as well, right? And making sure you all have the same idea of your issues.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important to kind of try to be one cohesive unit when you're working on a project, and that is hard to do. Because we're human, we're not robots. We all have our individual personalities and flaws. I think with software engineering as well, it can also be very emotional, even though it shouldn't be. People can feel attached to the work they've produced. They feel like emotional about the code they've written, and you can feel like suggestions or improvements are like an attack on what you've made or like your skills or creative ability. When that's not what it is. It's just like suggesting improvements to the work you've done to make it even better, right? But it can be hard to like not be emotional about that.
Yeah, I think it's very human as well. I think it's something you always have to be aware of, right? If you find yourself thinking, yeah, well, this person is an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. I do. Mm-hmm. They're wrong. There's probably something you should take a step back and go, okay, am I like really looking at this in the best way, or is this because it's my work? Am I being defensive of it?
Mm-hmm. And I think with the like agile processes we've been like following and stuff this week, we've kind of been a bit agile, like little a agile with it, right? We're not taking it very strictly.
Yeah. And
I like that. That's the type of agile that I like. There are some processes I think that are maybe just there just for the purposes of being agile, which in my eyes isn't agile. So we might review this in the team retrospective, right? So we've got things like the Nico. I'm wondering if these will make it through the retrospective.
I think you've got to look at it, as we were talking about from the planning poker, is what discussion came from it? What did we learn from it? If it's just, I'm feeling... So Nico, for those that don't know, is just... is effectively asking members of the team to rate their happiness on that day as a scale of like happy face to sad face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. So I think that's valuable if you're finding the team isn't always performing to the best, and there's people that might be disassociating with the team a little bit, not very happy with the way progress is going, and to pull that out and to like kind of force a discussion, because I think it's very easy just to let that go unnoticed.
Yes.
But I think at the moment we're not experiencing that.
I think sometimes you can focus more on like the software engineering problems rather than the human problems, right? And I guess that's what it more tries to address.
Yeah, I think it's to stop just like insidious upset going unnoticed, right? If someone's like really hurt by something that happened, it's trying to pull that out, right, nicely.
Yes, and I'm finding in our team, we're meeting like so often, I don't know if that is something we wouldn't have noticed anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like you get a good idea of how people feel in just like the small kind of group we're in. And I think the benefit of something like Nico Nico, it kind of just depends quite a lot, I think, on the group of people that you have. Because if we were working on some other project with like some other group of people, this might have turned out to be like a really useful tool.
Yeah.
But I'm right now I'm not seeing the use of it. But this is the benefit of retrospectives, right? We look back and decide what we think worked and what didn't. And we don't just blindly move on with something unless it's providing value for the team.
Yeah, and I think also another part of all of the, I mean, it's again, I'm just like going off slightly on one here. And it's, you have to be really honest with the way you deal with a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a process to get through. You have to be honest with yourself and the team. And so, for example, a Nico chat is only beneficial if the team is happy to say, yeah, actually, I'm not particularly happy about something that happened.
Yes. Are they even prepared to say that, you know?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
If it's likely that the team is just going to go, okay, it's fine, move on, then it's, again, not particularly valuable.
Yes. Is everyone in the team understanding the value of these processes? Are they being honest with it? And also, are you just being agile for the sake of being agile? Or do you understand the value of the things that you are doing and saying, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important.
It can be easy, I think, to fall into the trap of being agile for the sake of it. As in putting in processes in place because you want to be or seem more agile or feel more agile, as opposed to actually being more agile, right?
Yeah.
You would be more agile by, in that case, being less agile. But that's the whole point of looking back retrospectively, isn't it? To see what's worked and what hasn't.
Yeah, and I wonder, I see this in many things, particularly in myself, in just because something is an option, feeling bad for not using it, right? And particularly with the Agile stuff, and there's so many different tools that you could use, so many different processes.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you look at like the literature on Agile, there's, I think, thousands of books and thousands of different ways to do Agile, you know? You can't follow all the different methodologies. You have to kind of just choose what works for you and your team. And that might, you know, vary from week to week, you know? That is the point of, you know, iterating not only on your software, but in your process as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Iterating and constantly improving to make your team and your work the best that it can be.
Yeah, and just understanding as well, I think, just understanding how it's going, how other people are thinking, trying to become as one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we discussed this last time when we said it's easier to work as one person because the communication is just instant. You don't have to work through that language barrier. So it's just trying to improve that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ryan, there's been a little bit of movement on your project that you've released to the internet.
Yes.
someone sent you an email about something?
So yes,
What's that about?
It's looking like I'm going to have a paid subscriber now for the product that I've been working on, which is quite exciting. So they've subscribed, but they're still on their free month, you know.
Right.
But they have handed over their financial information, so it is likely, I'd say, that they're going to continue to subscribe. But it's been quite interesting because I've spoke briefly to you about this, in that they were asking for a feature of being able to switch from one user to the other, so being able to have multiple users in the system, right, that they all control. which isn't something I'd initially planned for, being able to switch like that. I had thought about the potential for you to want to set up like kind of brands or something within your account.
Right.
And I did think about that initially, but I didn't like plan the system around it, because it didn't seem like high priority. I didn't think it was something that was going to be wanted a lot. At least I didn't think it would be the first thing someone would actually request,
Yeah.
So it's been quite interesting to like work around that. I've kind of like, the way I've kind of went about it is not the best from like a software engineering point of view. So I've kind of like, it's a little bit hacky, I guess, but not really.
I think it'd be fairly described as a bodge.
It's a little bodgy, but I actually don't think it is that bodgy, right?
Okay. Do you want to describe in like vague detail what it is?
So vaguely, what I'm allowing now is if you want to switch accounts, you can create an account with the same email address, verify that email once you get the email verification sent to you, and then you can switch between accounts with the same email address. What I've done on like the back end, it's really not that bodgy, Adam. It sounds bodgier than it is. It's actually quite nice on the back end. And I don't think the solution I've made is that bad. Do I think there's nicer options? 100% yes. There are better options out there. Have I pursued them? No.
So there are, in your users table, multiple users under the same username.
With the same email, yes.
With the same... So what is the data you're storing in your users table?
So there's not much actually stored in there. Name, email address, password, ID. Right.
So how much of that is the same between these two accounts?
Well, it would be the email that is the same.
The password is different?
Could be.
Right, okay. So logging it... So what happens, a user puts their email in and can have one of multiple passwords.
Right, I know what you're saying. So Laravel has accounted for this for me, perhaps.
Right, okay.
When you log in, it will look for the first user record with that email address, and then it will check to see if the password you entered matches that password. It will not search the database for any user with this email or password, right? It just looks at the first one that has that email address, which I didn't know. So this is quite a fun little thing for me to look at. Because I kind of maybe assumed it would just look for a match with that username and email, but it doesn't. It gets the first user and sees if the password is a match. Okay? So what this essentially means for this new system I've built is that you have one main account, your first account that you create, which is what you use to log in with. You can't use like your secondary accounts to log in with. They're not log-inable, right. If that makes sense. You can switch to them. They're switchable, but you can't log in with them.
Right, okay. So how does a user create a new account, a new sub account? I don't know what the nomenclature is for this.
Me neither, really. It's a new idea. So you would sign up using the same email address. The password can be different. The password's sort of irrelevant, but not really. I'll come back to this now.
Okay.
But then that is all the process is. Verify your email, because then you know that this account is actually owned by that email address, right?
Yeah.
And then you can switch between accounts with that same email address to have it verified. But the password thing, because I said you can log in with the main account with your initial password, right? Your initial password.
Yeah.
If you deleted that account, then your next secondary account would become your main account. And then you would use that password to log in.
Right.
It's convoluted, but it's also simple. I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't know if I agree that it's simple.
If you looked at the code for it, It's really not that much. It's quite simple. And the tests for it are really good, nice tests.
Are they? Okay.
Yes, and it's actually, what I've made in the end is not that bad. From the user's perspective as well, the account switching looks good, works well. Security is all like, sorted out for it as well. I'm quite proud of it, despite it being not what I would really want.
So are there vulnerabilities to doing this though?
So
if I try to recreate an account that has the same email as someone else, which is allowed, and I reset that password, what happens?
So you need access to the email account, right? Because you have to be able to verify the email first. Only then are you allowed to switch between accounts.
I see, okay.
So you can only switch between accounts if you actually own that email address. Not until you're verified are you able to do that.
Right, okay.
So I think it's quite... It potentially opens some holes, but not really. It is mostly secure from like that point of view. Okay? The issue is more just around like... I probably haven't made it the best way that I could have. And that is more what I wanted to discuss with you rather than like the implementation side of it.
Yeah, no, I think this brings out some interesting discussion on like how to design extensible, durable software to begin with, right?
To begin with, but you've got to consider another side of it as well, right? Because you've got like the business side of things. You've got pressures for speed, quality, features. How do you balance these two sides?
So some background is I've heard about this already, as has been mentioned, and I was against it, right? So I thought, well, you could have made it. I think it should have been made into like a separate teams aspect. So there'd be users belong to a team, and the team has an account.
Mm-hmm. The particular thing that I'm like solving here, if you will, is that the user who requested this, they specifically said they want to sign up with with the same email address. They didn't want to have multiple emails just to manage all these accounts. So you shouldn't always take that at face value, though. You should look at what the actual problem of what they're saying is. Because what they say isn't always what they mean. Okay?
Yes, exactly.
When users request things, you need to look at what the actual problem is beneath the feature they're requesting. The problem, I think, could have been addressed in a few ways. You've got like the teams idea, like profiles within like a user account that you can switch between, rather than just changing the user model as a whole. There's a few different ways you can go about it. The way I did it was probably the fastest way, right? And I've said this to you, and you can probably agree with me as well, is that it's hard for me to say, I should spend weeks refactoring this when I can make it quite quickly in a slightly hackier way. And it'll be out there faster as well. The feature will be out there faster. And it's hard for me to spend those weeks when right now it makes no money, right?
Yeah.
Right now it's I'm spending money on it to keep it up.
Yeah.
So is it worth it to spend weeks and weeks on something, refactoring, possibly breaking a lot of things along the way for production users, maybe if it reached that point, because
that's poor on your front there, really, Ryan. If you're breaking production, that's.
But what I'm saying is, this kind of thing would completely change how it now works with the posts and channels and all this being linked to the user. It would have to rip all that out because they would now be linked to like profiles or teams or something, right? It would completely change how it works. And it is possible that this would mess up production, especially when the production database already exists with these links to users in place.
Yeah.
It would completely mess that up.
Yeah, okay, I can see. I mean, I think that
I want to
the
add
way
another point as well, Adam. I'm sorry. is
okay.
that this is a big problem with like legacy systems, okay? The legacy exists, and it is very hard to change away from that once you put it in place, once you've got people using it. Because software does not exist in a vacuum, right? And it's easy to, from a more agile perspective, to think of the perfect, ideal way the thing should be. But once you've got real users in there using it, you're not going to be able to have it perfectly how you want it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fairly reasonable solution to that, and that's don't deploy to production until it works, and the deploy to production is a migration of the current users.
Yes.
Right, so you would write a migration for the current users table into a new one, and that would solve it for you.
So you would maybe have like a staging environment, so you could check that it works there first. And with the migration, I don't know, that migration might become possibly messy, possibly might not work.
Well, you'd test until it worked.
You would. But all of this, Adam, is not free, right? You're spending a lot of time on these things to make it so nice, right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Is a bit vague, because how do you really value nice in terms of software?
I agree and understand. I think the calculation needs to be, this is going to only get worse. Right? So if other people want kind of similar but slightly different, so if it's the case that they want multiple different users managing one Twitter account, how are you going to solve that? Right? That's going to be more bodges onto this framework. So it could be saving you time, complexity in the future to have it also not only more reasonable, but also more standardized, right? So if you brought someone else onto the team, they would understand the model fairly quickly, rather than having to be informed, okay, well, it actually works in lots of weird ways. So I think scaling up vertically and horizontally, having a larger team or having more complex issues will make this exponentially worse. So at some point you've got to say, okay, now we've got to refactor this.
Yes, and everything you say makes sense, right? But you have to still think about the, is it worth it value? Because I could, spend weeks and weeks and get all those advantages that you just mentioned, but they're all kind of just related to possible future scenarios which might never occur. So, you say you might bring someone else onto the project, they'll get to understand it faster. But in reality, I could explain it in a couple of sentences, and that I might not even bring someone else onto the project. So it's kind of handles future situations which might not happen. You can argue being agile about it in both ways, because by not doing it, I'm eliminating waste and not spending the time on things that don't need to happen, right?
Well, actually, you can, if in 10 years, in 2 years' time, it turns out that this was the only change you needed to make, then you were right. If in 2 years' time that's not the case, then you were wrong. I think it's probably better to err on the side of caution, because at the moment you're fairly time rich.
I would not say I'm time rich.
You're not time rich, okay.
No, and I do not, at this point, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this project when I've got other things to do.
Okay.
If I'd made this properly now, Adam, right? I know I'm going off a bit now. The way you would want it to be, okay? And I spend 4 weeks making it. This person who's requested this feature, they might have moved on by then because I didn't have this feature for them.
Yeah, so maybe
This is the balancing act you have to do between agile and the business pressures, because they need to exist together, right? That you need both of them. You cannot just make software the best it can be, and it never makes money because you're doing everything slowly in the right way, right? You've got to balance it out.
Agile is about, just working software, right? It's about ticking those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd agree. I think this is possibly, you do this first, right? This done now, you get it, you ship it, and it's working. It's in a working state. But also, I think you should if you've got, some downtime, you're not doing anything, some thought or time into, okay, refactoring this slightly.
Yes, and this is the good thing, right, about making software is you never finish with it. And I can always refactor this. I can, it's all under version control, so I can reach the point in time before I started this feature. I could come back and refactor this to be a better solution, but I don't have to right now. And maybe I've achieved more by making it so quickly because I might now actually make money from it.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable point.
You have to balance the business side with the agile side.
Yeah, no, I think
it isn't like we just make software for fun to make it as good as possible. We need money from it. We make it to make money. That is why we make software, unless we make it open source.
Yeah. Well, even then, but yeah, I think it opens interesting questions about the way you could have started it. Right? You were mentioning that you kind of thought about this at the beginning. I think moving forward, maybe you think, okay, this could be asked. The first person who tries to pay for this product might actually want this, number one. So maybe we have it as more extensible in the design.
It's a lesson learned from that point of view, because it is something I had thought of, and I didn't put it in because I didn't think it would be needed. And now the system kind of is built around how I initially planned it, not accounting for the ability to switch between profiles or whatever, So yeah, it's a lesson learned from that perspective. It's all about lessons, though, isn't it, Adam? we learn a lot along the way.
From going on what we were talking about before, it's cheapest. The earlier you do something, the cheaper it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that applies to what you've done there. That it's cheaper to do it properly now than it is, 5 years in the future. I think that's been good. We've learned a lot. We've covered what our first week of the project's been like. We've covered some thoughts about planning and executing refactoring. The
mix of Agile and business. I'm going to make my own variation of Agile. I think I can do it. I think what the world needs is another Agile framework.
There's an excellent XKCD about that, isn't there? Yeah, well, we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.